Perfectionism is characterized by high expectations and high standards placed on ourselves to perform in certain ways. And I had some really good conversations with clients this week about this concept and spoke with some friends. I spoke with my mentors, and I thought it'd be really important to share some information with you guys on this topic because I think it's prevalent. It happens a lot in our society, and pretty much everybody I talked to this week has had an experience of dealing with perfectionism and those high standards and high expectations. And one of the things that I talked about with friends is these videos and in a radio show that I do where, I associate with a lot of people who do radio shows, and they had fallen subject to perfectionism in the way of always wanting to have the perfect lighting, always wanting to have the perfect camera, the perfect video quality, the perfect setting, right? And they'd have these wonderful ideas for shows, and they would never do them because they always wanted it to be perfect. They had these huge expectations and these huge standards, and it would keep them from just doing the show, just talking about the things that were valuable. And we were kind of joking around because when I had first started, I used to put out these really low quality videos, and I told them, I said, I got to a place in my life where I had all those thoughts. I wanted things to be perfect. I wanted the best setting, the best lighting, the best camera, right? But then I realized I felt like I had information that people might want and that people might like or find valuable because I have a full practice of clients who find it helpful. And so I thought, hey, I want to be of service. I want to put information out. So I'm just going to set it up and press the record button. And what that's done is it's allowed me to just do things that I love, do things that I'm passionate about, have wonderful conversations and get good feedback from people who are, utilizing good information. And I find that wonderful because, the people who shared with me their journeys, their experience, their hope, they didn't do that perfectly. They just did it. They just shared with me freely what their experience was. And I've learned a lot in my journey, not just as a therapist, but in my own recovery journeys and my own spiritual journeys, walking with people who are willing to be imperfect. I've learned a lot about letting go, right? Letting go of expectations, letting go of standards, not having to have things be perfect. See, I spent a lot of time in my life striving for accomplishments, striving for the next best thing, trying to be perfect at the things that I did. And I did that for a lot of years. But it wasn't until I slowed down and realized, like, number one, I was exhausted. Number two, I was lonely. All of my pursuits had me doing things on my own. It had me out there by myself experiencing loneliness. And then I would isolate and wonder, like, what was the problem? And that got so bad that even while I was a licensed therapist, and this was years ago, early in my licensure, I was practicing as a therapist at a treatment center, and I would come home isolated, right? And I would do this every night where I was around people all day, but just focused on my profession. But then I would go home and I was isolated, and it caused me to reach out to a therapist. And I still see her to this day. I've been seeing her for years and years. And I spoke with her about perfectionism this week because I told her, I said, I'm looking around my life these days. And over the years of growing and taking care of myself, I find myself in a house that I enjoy. I rent a nice house. I've got a dog that is just the cutest darn thing, and I love him to death, and it's just a wonderful companion. I've got a car that runs. All my basic needs are met. Life is good. And I'm still struggling at times with this feeling of, but I want it to be perfect. I want it to be better. And what I realized is that, I have a lot of clients who struggle with that too. And I know a lot of people, a lot of friends who struggle with that too. When I do my radio show, I get a lot of feedback on that exact concept. And what I realize is that as people, we're looking for the externals. We're distracting ourselves with the externals. And I can speak to that personally, not just as a clinician, right, who's observed it in thousands and thousands of people, but personally. And my therapist reminds me this, and I'm always really appreciative of her feedback on this, is Whenever we look at a situation and we think it needs to be better, we think it needs to be perfect, that's an internal job, right? There is nothing outside of us that's going to give us that satisfaction, that's going to meet that need, that's going to be what we need to feel like everything is okay. The reminder is that that takes place inside, reminding ourselves when those feelings come up that I'm perfect the way I am right now. And that might sound cliche and in today's day and age where everything's a little bit fluffy and puffy, and I like that kind of stuff, but the reality is there's something really tangible about reminding yourself that you're okay, that you don't need all of the things outside of yourself, right, to confirm that things are perfect and that it's going to meet these high standards and expectations. Sometimes we just need to remind ourselves that the way things are right now are okay. It reminds me of a story my mentor shared with me years ago. He told me this story. He says a young man walks up to an invisible wall in the ether. And on the other side of this wall, he sees everything he's ever wanted in his life. He sees peace and serenity and love and abundance and wealth and a family and all of the things he ever wanted. And he walks up to this invisible wall and there's a door. And he knocks on the door and the greeter answers and the greeter says, "What's the password?" And the young man says, "I don't know." So the greeter says, "Well, why don't you go and ask your mentor, and when you get the password, come back." And so the young man goes and he asks his mentor what the password is, and so the mentor shares it with him. And the young man says, that's it? And the mentor says, just go and try it, right? So the young man goes back, and as he walks up, he's excited again because he sees on the other side of this wall everything he's ever wanted. So he walks up and he knocks on the door, and the greeter says, "What's the password?" And the young man looks at him and says, "I am nothing. I am no one." And the greeter says, "Come on in, the door's unlocked." Perfectionism tells us that we have to be something, that we have to do something, that we have to be more than we are. But the reality is in order to obtain the things that you want in life, we have to let go of the outcomes. And I'm reminded as I walk with clients and as I walk in my own journey with my therapist and with my support, that perfectionism was always only about controlling outcomes. It was only about looking so far down the road towards what's next and what could be better that I wasn't focused on the here and now. I wasn't taking care of the little details in my life that would get me where I wanted to go. And it wasn't until I let go of those things and admitted to myself that I don't have to be more than I am right now. I just need to show up and take care of myself today, that I was able to move in a direction towards a better, more fulfilled life. And this is what I work with my clients on often in direct ways and subtle ways over time, is like, how do we let go and detach from the outcomes? Things do not have to be perfect. In fact, life is almost guaranteed to be messy. We know that life is guaranteed to have suffering and pain. But the good people in my life, the wise people in my life, and clients that I've watched grow embrace one simple truth, and that's pain is what's going to lead me towards the growth that I want. Pain is what's going to lead me out of the problems. But avoiding that pain and looking so far beyond it towards everything that could be perfect if it just went away keeps us trapped in a pattern and in a loop. And so breaking free, breaking that cycle is about looking at the pain and admitting to ourselves that the pain is causing imperfections. It's causing me to be human. It's causing me to, be in a place I don't want to be, but I have to learn from it. I've got to look at it. I've got to admit it to myself and a lot of times to others, depending on what type of pain we're talking about, so that I can move forward with my life, so that I can free myself. But perfectionism tells us I don't need to address my pain. I don't need to address my shortcomings. In fact, I need to hide those as best as I can so that I can have the perfect outcome. Because if people knew I was imperfect, then they wouldn't want to do X, Y, and Z with me, or they wouldn't like my stuff, or they wouldn't accept me for the way that I am. So I'm not going to look at the pain. I'm not going to look at the imperfection. I'm going to put on a perfect mask and let everybody know that I'm perfect. And we don't consciously have this conversation with ourselves all of the time, but this is really what happens, right? It's observable. We see this in celebrities. We see it on social media. Let me put the best version of myself forward no matter what, even though I have a lot of stuff that's blowing up in my life. I mean, how many cases have we seen over and over again in the media of people that get idolized, celebrities, and then it turns out that they've done horrific things, that they've done horrible things, and and then everything blows up. It's like perfection always blows up because it's not obtainable. It's not sustainable. It's not something that we should be striving for. I think it's okay to strive for excellence, right? To be tenable, to be good at what you do. I think that's extremely important to strive for, to build things in your life and to be a part of communities and to be a part of something bigger than yourself. Those are all wonderful things to strive for. But if you start trying to strive for them perfectly and to do and those things perfectly, you're going to burn yourself out. And we've seen it time and time again. And it's no wonder, right, when you see really famous people where it's like, oh my God, they were doing what? Right? There's no wonder that those things happen because perfectionism isn't sustainable. You burn yourself out. And what do human beings do when they're burnt out? They distract themselves, oftentimes with behaviors that give them some kind of effect. So you see people that are engaged in questionable activities like substance use and questionable sexual behaviors and gambling and drinking too much because they're distracting themselves from the pain that is confirmed by not being perfect. And it gets multi-layered and multifaceted as to how to break that down. But this is on a surface level what's occurring. And I think it occurs more and more in society because, well, we have access to things like social media and we have access to being in the public light. And those are good tools if used properly, all right? They can be really dangerous when used to pursue perfection, right? To have nothing wrong with you, to not be human. And I'll say this, any client I've ever worked with in my career, and any time I've ever felt this, letting go, right? Being human, letting things be imperfect has always led to relief. And that's easy to say, but it does take action, right? And I'll share with you this. There's an acronym we use. I use it in my clinical practice. We use it in recovery circles called AAA. Awareness, acceptance, action. And there's a couple junctures here that I like to point out, which is it's great to have awareness that there's a problem. It's even better to be aware of what that exact problem is. All right? It's great to have acceptance of problems, but it's even better to have acceptance of the exact problems that are going on. All right? Because when you have awareness of exactly what's going on in your life, and you have acceptance of those things that are going on in your life, you're much more likely to take action in the moment. And this is what starts to combat things like perfectionism. All right? I don't have to have these high standards and these high expectations for the way things turn out because I'm taking action in my life today. And so we create that structure of like, if something's wrong, I need to ask myself, what's my part in it? What's going on for me? And can I be aware of that? Then can I accept that, hey, I may have created some problems for myself. That's the good news, is that I'm responsible, therefore I can do something about it. Then I take action. See, but if we're not taking action in the present moment, then oftentimes we're thinking so far down the road, right? We're thinking of the way that things could be, and oftentimes we're projecting the perfect image of what those things could be, and it makes us anxious. It makes us worried. It brings up the fears and the thoughts that maybe it won't turn out that way. And here's the reality is we're not there yet. We don't know what it's going to turn into. We don't know what's held down the road for us in our lives. What we do know is that right here, right now, I do have the capacity to take action. And we want to get into a better position to be able to do that. And so I would encourage you, take a look at your life today, maybe write down what your experiences have been. Take a look at it. Gain some awareness. Ask yourself, what's wrong, right? What's good? What's bad? What could I do better, right? And gain some direct awareness of what that is. And then practice some acceptance around it. Okay, life isn't exactly where I want it to be, but here I am, right? What can I do about it? And The answer isn't going to be anything revelatory from day to day. It's a series of little actions day to day that make your life better and make it worth living. And none of that needs to be perfect. I'd like to circle back and remind you, it's okay for things to be a bit messy. It's certainly okay for them not to be perfect, right? Let go of the standards. Let go of the expectations, and you're going to feel better. I think a lot of times we're taught that you'll feel better when, right? You'll feel better if it's perfect. You'll feel better when you reach that place. But I'll tell you this. All of the accomplishments I ever had in my life, that I've ever achieved, that I've ever been a part of, I got to the end of it, and the only question I had was, what's next? Not, man, this is wonderful. I never had those moments of like, man, I made it. And truly, there are a lot of things where I could look back and think like, I really did. I've done some stuff and it's been really cool. But the question was always, what's next? And that's perfectionism, right? What can I do next? What accomplishment is next? Versus getting into a place of, here I am. I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to be in the moment. All right? It may not be perfect, but this is what's on my plate today. And I'm going to look at it and address it and take care of myself through it. And I think if you do those things, you're going to find some relief. I think if you do those things, you're going to feel a lot better. And so I would encourage you to do those things. And I would encourage you, to start to think about how can I implement taking care of myself. It's a worthwhile pursuit. It's painful, right? Because the spoiler alert is when you start to let go of standards and expectations and take a look at what you can do as far as taking action in your life through little steps that are messy but clean things up, it's painful. All right. So lean into that pain. All right. You're not alone. You're not alone in that. I want to stress the importance of that statement. You are not alone. And so as always, if you're out there and you're struggling, right, you're feeling distress, or you're just not in a good spot, I would encourage you to look into therapy in your area. All right. Find a therapist that you can talk to and work through some of these things. If you're struggling with substances, I would encourage you to find a 12-step recovery program, AA or NA. They're the people who are going to help you find lasting sobriety and long-term recovery. If you're a friend or family member of someone who struggles with substances, I would encourage you to find the program of Al-Anon. They are the individuals in that program that will help you find the answers to gain peace and serenity in your life. But that's all I've got for you today. I would love to hear your comments down below and just kind of what prompted some thoughts for you in today's discussion, and drop them in the comments below. And we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to this information. Have a good one. Bye.